Welcome back to Halloween Lives. I am your host, Austin Duncan, and I am so excited to bring you here for episode 83 of this lovely podcast, which is about two of my brother Blaine and I's favorite things, Halloween and Halloween. And I'm coming to you. I'm recording this on October 22nd of the year 2024. And we are creeping so close to the unholiest of days, to the day that myself, my brother, and so many of you look forward to every single year. And that is Halloween, man. I am stoked that we are this close. It's almost unbelievable. And I think I've already got the beginnings of the Halloween hangover that Blaine and I talk about on the show, where I'm starting to feel the effects of, damn, it's really coming to a close here. Now, I am lucky enough that we do this podcast year round, and we talk about our favorite things all year round, so it keeps that energy going. But man, we are right here in the 11th hour. Really excited to be coming over to you today. Blaine is working at the haunt right now. He's getting everything set up. If you've caught the last few episodes, you know him and I are working on a small haunt outside of the Twin Cities that we're going to be working at, acting in, doing all the spooky things, and it's definitely very time consuming, especially for Blaine. And so he's there. We're going to start walkthroughs tomorrow, and then next day on, it's game time, and I got to be real spooky for the next few days and try to scare the living daylights out of people moving forward. So Blaine, best of luck to you. He sent me some pictures of the stuff he's been building for the haunt. It's an indoor haunt, but trying to make it look like an outdoor rustic vibe, and it is really, really friggin' cool. He's doing some awesome work, and we're gonna have some stories to talk about after this is all said and done, without a doubt. I know last year, him and I actually, it was both of our first year at the haunt. And it was really cool. Something that we don't talk about enough on the show is just, going to these haunts or these haunted houses, these spooky attractions. I think we might have mentioned it a little bit, but earlier this year, Blaine and I did go to Screamtown, which is located in Chaska, Minnesota. It's absolutely one of the best haunts in the Midwest, and I just reckon the United States, honestly, and we'll get kind of more into that, but it does show up in a movie that I've watched since our last tape. But yeah, got to go there with him, and actually ended up going there again last weekend with my fiance and her family, and there's nothing that gets you quite in the Halloween spirit like getting the shit scared out of you by people with good funding. Like this haunt is seriously well funded. It's one of the best. Definitely want to get out there if you're in the area, or Dead End Hayride is another one that I absolutely love. We've got Valley Scare, and I believe the Trail of Terror is still around, but that one was one that I went to a lot growing up, and that one was fantastic as well. But yeah, Screamtown is one of those places, man. They just have a lot of different attractions, a lot of great prosthetics, makeup, and so many great animatronics, and man, that just gets you, like I said, in the Halloween mood. And that's where I'm coming at you today from, is this deep feeling of being in the spirit of Halloween. And I try to describe it to people that don't necessarily know what I mean when I say, like, I got to get into the spirit, or I'm really in the spirit right now. It sounds like I'm like possessed by something, to which I don't believe I am. I think it's just truly like, if you get it, you get it. It's one of those times of the year where, I think a lot of people get in the Christmas spirit. And I think that's maybe a little bit more relatable, but that spooky, haunted, creepy feeling. I walk home a lot from work right now, and I also, while I'm doing so, I listen to the soundtrack of the original Halloween by John Carpenter, and it really just trying to soak in all the spooky vibes, to say everything I've said in the last 5 minutes. Combined, but yeah, so we are deep into the thick of it. Gonna go over the movies that I've watched this October. Again, Blaine and I do 31 nights of Halloween when it comes to October. I started back on September 13th this year because it was Friday the 13th, so I got a little head start on it. But it really helps me. Obviously this show has primarily focused on Halloween, the franchise of Michael Myers, but and while I have watched a lot of those films, there are so many great films to talk about that have really helped get me into this Halloween spirit. And so last time I chatted with you guys, I had just finished up The First Omen, which was a great film. Oh my God, we're about to get another live podcast sneeze. No, we're not. We're going to be okay. No, we're not. All right, we're good. The the first episode, or the first movie I've watched since the last episode, was The House is October Built, which is perfectly a good segue into what I was just talking about. The House is October Built is a kind of a found footage film that's done really well for what I would imagine is probably a very little budget. And it's about individuals that go through some of the craziest haunts in the United States. I think the first one primarily revolves around Texas and some of the haunts in that area. And they're looking for the most extreme haunt. They want to be really scared. They're like old friends. It seems like they've known each other for a really long time, and they're looking for that extreme haunt. And without giving spoilers away, as I sip my foggy, what is this? A Foggy Geezer by War Pigs Brewing. And without giving anything away, the extreme haunts, as you can imagine, get more and more ramped up until they ultimately find themselves biting off more than they thought they could chew. And I'll leave it at that. But it's a great movie. It's a great, again, getting you in the Halloween spirit kind of movie. Lots of cool, after watching earlier this year, we talked about Hell House LLC, which I thought was just fantastic, and very similar movie to that. This time a bit more from the visitor's point of view. And it's kind of become one of those movies that I watch every October for that reason. Just incredible Halloween vibes. And luckily for me, there is a second one, which is what I watched on the second night. And hard to go into kind of the synopsis of that film without spoiling anything from the first. But we get our crew back together. This time, a lot of the films take place, or a lot of the film takes place in Minnesota. So that's especially cool. And it was one of those things that neither I nor Blaine knew before going into the second one. But yeah, they go to Screamtown. They go to the Soap Factory, which is an unfortunately shut down extreme haunt in that was based in Minneapolis. And they go to the Zombie Pub Crawl, which is hosted in Minneapolis. I believe it's coming up this weekend. And they do a lot of the things that are. They go to the Dead End Hayride as well. They hit all the kind of big places in Minnesota. So it's really especially cool to me, even though in the movie they're like, why the hell are we in Minnesota? They go to Anoka, Minnesota, which is kind of known as the Halloween capital of the world, because allegedly that's where trick-or-treating started. Previous to that, it was just kids pulling pranks on the neighborhood, and they thought, let's turn this and make it positive or whatever. Whether or not that story is true, I don't know, but if you do Google the Halloween capital of the world, it will give you Anoka, Minnesota, which is pretty odd. So Blaine actually went up there last weekend when I was at Screamtown and went to their Halloween parade, which I heard is just an awesome, awesome time. Wish I could have been there as well. But yeah, House is October built too. Definitely a solid follow-up to the first. I love the first for what it is. The second one does get a little far-fetched for me. But it is still a great film nonetheless. Then I moved on to a film that I've talked about on the podcast a couple of times, one that I really appreciate, and it's fairly new, I would say, and that is Smile. Now, Smile is a film that came out, I believe, in 2022. And for those who have never heard about the film or haven't seen the film, you might have seen the marketing. It's kind of happening all over again with Smile 2 that's hitting the theaters, maybe even now. But they kind of had this viral marketing campaign where people were smiling creepy, in the first row of baseball games, or they like right now they're outside of buildings and they're just, creepily smiling. It sounds really dumb when I say it, but it looks pretty cool. But yeah, Smile was one of those movies that really wowed me. I know Blaine isn't huge on the film, but it's definitely one that I think will be in my rotation for a really long time. It's a very simple idea that they do a really good job of portraying throughout the film, and it's essentially like a psychological horror that really goes into the mental state of the afflicted person in the film. And the idea is there's this sort of supernatural curse that gets passed from one person to the other, it causes people to do some really horrible stuff while sporting a big old creepy smile. It's hard not to get into spoilers of that film, here and give you an idea of why I really like that film. But it is really well done. A lot of great practical effects, characters you don't hate throughout the film. And I just thought it was really well done. And I think it's going to be one that I watch a lot. The first time I saw it, I watched it and I was so wowed by a few of the scares and the way that they handled everything in that film that the next day I had a buddy over and we watched it again because I couldn't not share it with the world. But yeah, if you guys like Smile, let me know in the comments below. I know there are a lot of good criticisms for the film as well, so let me know what you think. Then with the next film I watched, I did want to go back to one that I hadn't watched in probably 10 years, and that was A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, the remake. And for a remake that, and I think I've even said it on the podcast a couple of times, this was coming out when Halloween got remade, Friday the 13th got remade. Obviously, A Nightmare on Elm Street got remade, and I think Leatherface or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had been remade for like the third time out of 4 at that point. And I truly remember really liking that film. I remember I thought Jackie Earle Haley did a great job as Freddy Krueger for, kind of tough shoes to fill with Robert Englund. And I remember really thinking that the acting was good and that the story was really good. And, time can open some wounds as well, because when I rewatched this film, I remember getting about halfway through and being like, I should have just turned on the original. A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake is fine. It's very 2010s. Every one of the high schoolers in that movie is easily older than me at 27. And it's a little too moody for me. It takes itself very, very seriously. makes some interesting choices. Now, I will kind of go into spoilers for this film because it is, 15 years old at this point. Um, the choices that were made on Freddy's character, who has always kind of been, just known as, it's really weird to draw this distinction, but he has always been known as a murderer of children and not so much a toucher. And this movie goes very far into the toucher storyline. It's always been maybe insinuated he was doing some shady stuff outside of obviously just murdering. But this one leaves it pretty black and white, man. He is a gross fella. Didn't love that choice. I thought her name is like something Mooney, I believe. She plays Nancy in the film. Just not a lot of personality in the film. Jackie Earle Haley does a solid job as Freddy Krueger. I will stand by that. I think he definitely was given a tough order to try and fill those shoes, but brought something new. And yet something still that felt reminiscent of the Freddy that we grew up with. I love the design of Freddy in this film. I know a lot of people don't. I love the design of the glove. I think it's very it's got skeleton or like bone metal pieces in it. And I think it looks really menacing. Love, Freddy's does some like cool little movements with his fingers that makes the blades make a cool noise before he attacks. There's a lot of cool creative choices, and it's definitely not a bad film. I just think it's something that, with a lot of these movies where, you remake it and maybe it feels new and refreshing at the time, but it sure doesn't age like it. I think obviously the original Nightmare on Elm Street far more timeless than that film. Following it up on a movie that a lot of people love that I just get so goddamn bored watching, and that is It Follows. I believe Blaine loves this film. I couldn't stay paying attention on this film. There's a lot of cool, creepy scares. I think the concept of it is great. It's similar to Smile in a lot of ways. I know there's a second one now in the works, but I this year watched It Follows, and man, I just couldn't get behind it. I found myself on my phone more often than I was watching the screen. The music in is great. The vibes are great. I just think it's a little bit too much of a slow burn for me for a guy that loves a slow burn film. And following that up, the last movie I've watched this October has been The Conjuring, featuring Ed and Lorraine Warren, or at least the characters are playing them, or the actors are playing them as characters. The Conjuring opens up the Conjuring universe, which has The Nun, Annabelle, so many movies in it. And, obviously The Conjuring itself has like 4 sequels. Texted this to Blaine last night as I watched it. I said, The Conjuring has not aged well for me either. I think it was one of those films that came out and everybody was like, oh my God, this is the scariest movie in so long. And I think at the time it definitely was. I just think it's a step below some of like the A24 films. It was kind of a necessary stepping stone to getting to movies like Hereditary, which I think is just a superior film. But The Conjuring is great as well. It's not, it doesn't hit quite the same for me as it once did. And perhaps it's because it's one of the more overplayed Halloween films or horror films that people watch around this time of year. But yeah, I think maybe next year I'll take a break from it again and hopefully come back to it at some point in the next few years with fresh eyes. But for right now, I'm good on taking a break on The Conjuring. And that wraps up my my October thus far. Like I said, we're getting into the end stretch here. Not sure if I'm going to be able to keep up a movie a night while we do this haunt, so might have to pick up the slack, which I undoubtedly will, as I'm taking off the last couple days of October to celebrate. But yeah, man, that's where I'm at. And now we can kind of get into the meat of this thing. Thank you guys so much for it. Sounds like a lot of you are enjoying this new kind of segmented way we're doing the show here in October, where we go over a lot of other things and then get into the other Halloween of the two Halloweens we love. Also, sorry for all the breaks where I drink. The first few episodes I did alone on this show, I tried to do no water, no breaks or anything like that. And by the end of the episode, you could tell my voice is just shot. Yeah, we're gonna be doing a little drinking and podcasting today. But yeah, today, as we draw near, I wanted to get philosophical when it comes to Michael Myers and relating to the big day that approaches. And one of my favorite episodes I did alone came over a year ago, I believe. It was regarding Michael Myers and what makes him scary. And I believe I said in like 2023, or it might have been 2022. I love that episode because it's very rare that Blaine and I get the opportunity to just sit down and just discuss some of what these characters really mean. I think we get into the meat really quickly without just soaking in the substance of these characters. And I wanted to kind of do that again when it comes to Michael Myers, who is obviously, to me, to Blaine, to so many of you, the king of this whole Halloween holiday and horror. I wanted to get into the idea of Michael being a supernatural being or a human. A topic that we have talked about on the show, that is brought up quite a bit in the movies, especially the most recent three in the trilogy of David Gordon Green. But I really wanted to dissect it and sit here and talk with you about it. On these episodes where Blaine's not here, there's not a lot visually going on. So, I'd imagine, listeners maybe on a walk during a cool October afternoon, or curled up by the fire, trying to hear maybe some spooky things to get yourself in that Halloween spirit. And so today we are going to get philosophical when it comes to Michael Myers and whether or not he is a man or simply the shape of one, or maybe not so simply. And I think the more exciting, the area that is probably more fitting to talk about first would be the shape. Obviously, John Carpenter writes the script and creates Halloween 1978, what we know and love. And Michael Myers in the credits in the script is listed as the shape once he dons the mask and once we see him at that older age. And it's a really interesting way to describe the character, as simply the shape of a man. We hear a lot of Loomis talking in that film, as well as Halloween 2 and Halloween 4, about how when Loomis met the young Michael Myers after he had killed his sister Judith, he describes how he sees only blackness or darkness in the eyes of Michael Myers, the eyes of the devil, and he has a blank, emotionless face, and any sort of substance of human had been removed from the character. And it's really interesting because we're trying to paint a picture right away that clearly at one point, though it's never described in the original films, Michael was a normal kid. I know the remakes have gone into kind of the perfect storm of what might make a real life Michael Myers, but there's something a little bit more and a little bit more mysterious in John Carpenter's original series, regarding like this almost supernatural loss of humanity that Michael Myers encompasses, even from that early age. And so there was a definitive point or a gradual loss of that humanity that eventually leads to the actions of Halloween 1963, where Michael takes out Judith. And then from that point on, that humanity is never gained back. And it definitely creates this boogeyman feature to Michael Myers, where he is more than a man. There is something else going on, or perhaps the opposite. There is nothing going on except pure evil. And I wanted to get into that and kind of dissect that and what that means for Michael as a character. I think I want the two areas I want to really dive in on for each of these possibilities would be the fear factor, as well as the story and how it affects the storytelling throughout, both the original and throughout the sequels. And I think when it comes to Michael Myers being the Shape, I think there's something much darker, a lot spookier for the audience. I think fear plays a larger element when you're describing something that's almost a monster. And John Carpenter, very clear about his influences. You even see them in the 1978 film The Thing, which is about this monster being that, it maybe imitates humans, but isn't quite human, and, infects the world around it. And I think that there's something very similar going on with Halloween and Michael Myers, especially in John Carpenter's Halloween 1, in Halloween 2, Halloween 4, and some of the other sequels as well that kind of go into the idea that Michael is, whether it be through supernatural, abilities, or just by the spirit of evil itself, he has lost humanity. He is not held to the same standards as a normal human being. And I think it's, as far as serving this story, it opens up a lot of interesting elements, especially with the Loomis character, who, I mentioned this many times before, so I'll just kind of go over it briefly for anyone who hasn't seen me talk about this. But, you've got this doctor character who is working in child psychology, who, you would expect to be well-educated, very secular, and very grounded in his beliefs. And he comes to, with all that education, with all that experience, the diagnosis, the physical diagnosis he gives for this young Michael Myers is that he's pure evil, which I would imagine, I'm not a child psychologist. God, I should never be. But I would imagine if you were a child psychologist and you came out and you diagnosed it, and you're saying to Mrs. Myers, hey, we ran the tests, we did the studies, we looked at your kid, we tried talking to him for months, and the test came back, and the only thing we can tell you is your kid is pure evil. You're probably getting fired as a child psychologist if that's your diagnosis. So what I'm saying is, it's like Michael Myers has to be so evil and so lost from humanity in John Carpenter's original vision that pure evil being the only thing you can point to is pretty damn crazy. And so I think it plays a huge part in the story, especially in the first film, on what kind of, being you're dealing with. And I think that's why a lot of the times people say it takes away from that character when you add motivation to it, like Lori being his sister. And so the story becomes something completely different when you add these other elements, because then you get the kind of combating ideas in each of these films. Well, is he this supernatural being who's driven only by pure evil, or is there some sort of familiar tie that's going on, and maybe that that in its own nature would bring him a little bit closer to the man side. You especially see this in the Thorn trilogy, where it gets spelled out a little bit more black and white with the Curse of Thorn, and there being sort of a bigger picture at play that affects a human rather than the idea of something just snapping, which I think is more John Carpenter in belief. I think that's why they ended up going back to that a little bit with the David Gordon Green trilogy by dropping the family storyline and bringing him a little bit closer to pure evil. Now, that being said, there's kind of two schools of thought. I talked about the butting heads just a minute ago with the two different ideas. I think in the recent trilogy, we really see that butting head, and it's going to move right into kind of the next section of talking to Michael about regarding Michael as a man, more than anything supernatural or evil. I guess he's evil no matter what. Dude's a bad guy. But in the recent trilogy, it seems like we're a little bit, we removed the family ties in Halloween 2018, and we're back to like, okay, then why is he doing that? And that is a big story, piece is the podcasters, the doctor, the psychiatrist in that film. And a lot of the characters around are going, well, why did Michael do what he did back in 78? And why, why doesn't he say anything? What would he say? Could we get that to trigger him? Could we try to get answers from him? And it's because all of these people are assuming Michael is a man, a true human being. But it seems by the end of the film, these people don't get their answers. There's no rhyme or reason to what Michael Myers is, why he's doing what he's doing. And we're going, okay, I think, he might just be that shape of a man. And we go heads first into that idea in Halloween Kills, where, by the end, we're talking about Michael is this larger than life being that as he kills, he transcends, he becomes this infection, whether it's a metaphor or, true fact that he is kind of poisoning the town of Haddonfield. He's making others become monsters like him. And we really get this sense by the end of the film. I remember kind of thinking that as I walked out of the theater back in 2021, 22, Halloween Kills. I think 21. And by the end, I remember thinking like, damn, they kind of explicitly are saying, there's something supernatural going on with this guy, which I didn't love at the time. I was very big. And even at the beginning of this show, I was very like, nope, Michael is a human that snapped. He is the shape, but there's nothing supernatural going on there. He's just an evil dude. And I didn't like there to be anything more than that, especially not saying he like kind of gains power as he kills. It felt a little video gamey to me. It felt very character. It felt very fake. And then that's where they pump those brakes so goddamn hard in Halloween Ends to prove to you in every moment that you see Michael in that film that this dude is just a dude. It's such a dramatic shift in Halloween Ends to go from Michael Myers is getting stronger and stronger and stronger to, the first time we see Michael, he's shaken like a leaf, and he's beaten, he's bruised, he is an oldish man, and, he's very human. He gets bested by somebody else due to his weakened state. He ends up, spoiler alert, getting freaking butchered. He gets obviously they take the knives to his arteries. They put him in the trash compactor. He explodes. He pops like a pimple in that thing. And by the end, Laurie in the end of that film is going, Michael's just a man, evil doesn't die. It just changes shape, whatever. All I'm saying is it's a big diversion, of course. And me, Blaine, we are defenders of Halloween Ends. Good God. So sorry for bringing that up again. But here we are. And it leads me to kind of my next idea of like, well, then when it comes to fear, when it comes to story, how does Michael being a man, or just a human being and less loss of humanity or less supernatural, I should say, lend itself to being better for the story or for the fear factor? Obviously, when it comes to him being supernatural, you've got this different kind of fear, this fear of the unknown. What is he? How does he do this? Is he a monster? Can you kill him? What are his weaknesses? Everything like that. But when you think of Michael as a man, for me, I believe the fear factor might even be larger. And it was something that I talked about a lot because I focused mainly on the fear of what makes Michael Myers a scary character still to this day. And I think the idea, and it was something I talked about a lot in that episode, the idea that someone like you or me or the 9-year-old down the street, the fact that something natural could happen to an individual that would snap and make you go from your normal everyday self, even if you're like me and you're a little fucked up anyways, but if you're just a normal good person, and something can naturally happen to you, whether it's chemicals in your brain or any sort of other stimuli that can make it happen, but something can happen to you or me that makes you just snap and you're cold and you are emotionless and your eyes, they lose that window into the soul, and you become this thing that is still human. You are still bound to the laws of nature, but you become this machine of evil. And to me, it's scarier because it's almost because it's obviously more believable. It's something that just psychologically is a lot more freaky to me, and I don't think like Halloween 1978 completely discounts this idea. I don't think Halloween 1978 is strictly saying Michael is a psychological or a supernatural being at all. I'm just saying, clearly by Halloween 2, when he's getting popped, he's popping back up. He's, a little bit more supernatural as time goes on, especially once you get into the Cult of Thorn films that try to explain why he keeps coming back. I think it loses a little bit of that fear element for the same reason why I think Michael Myers is a stronger character than Jason Voorhees, especially once Jason becomes this zombified creature. I think that humanity, that grounded in reality piece, brings the fear factor way up for me. And, I think it serves the story a little bit well if you choose to watch the sequels. Obviously, yes, he does become a little bit more supernatural in those films, but the idea of him being affected by a curse or him being, tied to targeting his family does lean itself a little bit more into the human factor. And you ask, different kinds of questions like, why would a human do these things? It's not just, what is this monster? What makes him tick? So yeah, I think for me, both on the fear side and the story side, I do love Michael Myers being a man. And I don't love the supernatural element of it. That being said, I think ultimately, like so many of these things, There needs to be a balance. And as we move forward into what the future looks like for Halloween, as we've got a new TV show in the works, and undoubtedly, I think I've said undoubtedly twice in this, by the way. It's undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, we will get more films in this franchise. We will see Michael again on the big screen. And like I said, I hope there is that balance. I hope, not only are we asking A questions or B questions, I hope we're asking all of the above when we see Michael, and we don't know what's really going on, because I think that is when Michael Myers is at his best, is when there are elements to him that make you go, this is clearly just a human being that can get hurt and, feels pain and is reacting to things, not based off of some demon control that's making this mindless operation take place. But there is true motivation here. I hope we get that, but we never know what the motivation is. I like having all of the questions, and I think when you stray too far one way or the other, that's when it starts to lose both the fear factor and the storytelling for me. And so with these new entries into the franchise that will undoubtedly come, I hope that pendulum stays somewhere in the middle, and I hope we swing. I hope we move both ways, but I hope it remains kind of at a true middle ground between those two things, because I think that is what makes the character of Michael so compelling to this day. If I can go back and touch on, again, that episode I did earlier at the beginning of this podcast, I think that really is what makes Michael so compelling. Having that balance, having all of those questions, and never really knowing what his next move is going to be. Whether he's a man, whether he is driven by something supernatural. I think the mystery of Michael Myers is what makes that character so great. Drink, sip, sip, drink break. So what do you guys think? Obviously, this is one of the big debates, or I shouldn't even say debates, because there's nothing really to debate here. But it's one of the best talking points. And it kind of gives you an idea or an opportunity to express what that character really means to you, and what's compelling about Michael Myers, both as a man or a supernatural being. I genuinely want the comments section of this to be novels of people describing, what their take on all of it is, because it in my opinion, and like I said, what makes it best is that it's subjective. And anybody can take it their own way. And it's never, I hate the definitive answers on Michael Myers. And I think that's why the Rob Zombie movies have kind of fallen for me, is because it is extremely definitive. And when I was younger, I really liked that definitive, style of the films. But as I get older, and as, the world is stranger, I think I like my Michael Myers strange too. And so I'm going to leave you with that. Next time I see you, we're going to be real close to the big day. And Blaine and I will have scared the shit out of a lot of people by that point. We're going to hopefully have success stories there. We're going to be way deeper into our 31 nights of Halloween. And we're going to be excited to share this great holiday with all of you guys. I want to say, something that we haven't touched on since we've came back is just the level of support we've gotten since returning after our little hiatus there. It's been awesome to see you guys get right back in step with us, and that we didn't lose too many of you during that month or so that we took off. It's awesome. I definitely appreciate each and every one of you that tunes in week in and week out to this show. And can't thank you enough. If you want to be one of those people that I love so freaking much, come on, man, give us a subscribe here on YouTube. Follow us at halloween.lives.podcast on Instagram for kind of the most up-to-date news on the show, what we're doing here, what we're doing next. If you like the video, and we will see you next time. This is Halloween Lives, the podcast of Halloween and Halloween. We will see you a little bit closer.